This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 353 of the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and we're in Las Vegas, Nevada for this episode of the podcast. How did I end up in Las Vegas, Nevada, weeks and weeks before CBC actually arrives? But I figured it might be fun to come out here to Vegas a few weeks before the entire United States or North American brewing world convenes on Las Vegas for the Craft Brewers Conference and talk to some Las Vegas brewers about how they brew, why they brew, and what goes into brewing the beers they brew. And first up on this mini series, a 3-episode series of Las Vegas episodes is Matt Marino, Director of Brewing for Able Baker. Welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jamie. Good to see you again.
This is again, right? That's the operative word. Like strangely enough, where I was out here last August for the American Distilling Institute trade show, and of all places, just ran into you and Dan Pixley from Milk the Funk just at Silver Stamp.
Yeah,
it's not
Silver Stamp.
It's not random.
Yeah,
it's self-selecting into a specific place for people that love beer, and Silver Stamp is absolutely that place here in Las Vegas.
That's the first Las Vegas tip for brewers to go to the Silver Stamp. It's going to be crowded, though.
It's going to be crowded. It's not just a great Las Vegas beer bar. It's one of my favorite beer bars in the United States. Like a fantastic, beautiful craft beer experience. And yeah, it's going to be crazy there.
Yeah, Rose and Andrew do a great job there.
They do a world-class job right here in Las Vegas. Great place to drink beer. Anyway, we just ran into each other, drank some beers, and then this idea to come out here and do some podcasts in advance. So we've got a couple more lined up for you over the next couple weeks. But first, we're going to talk to Matt about how Able Baker makes beer in some interesting ways. Obviously, lots of clear beer. The Atomic Duck West Coast style IPA is your biggest core beer. But you also play in that hazy space and make hazy session beer, and then even do some blending of West Coast and hazy IPA to make some other beers. Interesting stuff right there. And so we're going to dive into some of the methods around that, as well as some of the other things you brew. Before we do that, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer. Kevin Toger from Bearded Iris Brewing says G&D Chillers have been a valuable partner throughout our growth. They build high-quality equipment and know their machines extremely well. Most importantly, their customer service is best in class, which is a huge value add to our internal teams that manage these critical support systems. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring of your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is changing the game at this year's CBC in Las Vegas. As part of ProMock Craft Beer Solutions, they're presenting a holistic approach to craft brewing operations. Through their display of animations, holograms, and machinery, they're highlighting how they can advance every aspect of your production line. Visit go.probrew.com/CBC24 or contact them at contactus@probrew.com to schedule one-on-one time with one of their subject matter experts at booth 1783 at this year's show. ProBrew. Brew your beer. Also, Old Orchard has supplied flavored craft juice concentrate blends to over 46 states for the production of fruit-forward beer, cider, seltzer, wine, spirits, and more. By partnering with some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape, Old Orchard has become a go-to source of fruit-forward ingredients. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Matt. You know how we start this off. We start with a little bit of history. Tell us yours. What was your history through brewing?
Yeah, relatively typical. Just picked up the homebrew habit because one of my neighbors and one of my high school buddies started, and I thought, it'll be cool. I wasn't into beer. I was more into herbal things back then, and I just got into it. And then I grew up in Vegas, moved out to Salt Lake, so I've made a career of brewing beer in unlikely places. People think of Utah and beer, and they don't think much, but there's lots of great beers, out there.
Utah is amazing for beer. Obviously, It was very formative in my beer experience. back in the summer of 1995 when I lived out there, and like, it was totally like, oh, wait, this is how you do craft beer. Like you go to breweries and buy growlers and just drink fresh beer. Wait, this is amazing. It was totally new to me and exciting and fun coming from a kid who grew up in the South.
Yeah, no, when I moved out there, it was better than Vegas already, and
still might be a little better.
Oh yeah, no, it is a better beer scene there than it is in Las Vegas still. And
not to take anything away from Vegas. Vegas has been coming up.
Yeah, now you interviewed Kevin from Templin, and he was also an assistant brewer out there. When I was assistant at UNA, he was at Red Rock Brewing Company. So he's come a long way and makes some really great beers out there.
100%. Love him.
Yeah. So I started brewing my first batch in Vegas, moved up to Salt Lake a month later, and I met my buddy Scott Jennings, who is the R&D brewer at Sierra Nevada out in Mills River. And he was into homebrewing longer than I, and we got into it and brewed together all the time and thought we should open up a brewery, but quickly realized we didn't know what the hell we were doing. So he went to the VLB in Berlin and got a real education, and I ended up getting a job washing kegs at UNA Brewing Company. And as luck would have it, one of the shift brewers quit like a little over a month after I got there. So they're like, hey, you think you want to come up to the brew house? And off I went there, and that was great. It was a pretty simple system, and we brewed all the damn time there. We were making 14,000 barrels on a 15-barrel system. So 4 brews a day, 7 days a week. And I was one of the weekend and also during the week, but shift brewer. So
you did your time and you learned, you got the discipline that way.
Yeah. I didn't learn a lot about making different kinds of beers because we basically had one flagship, our Cutthroat Pale Ale, and then we had a porter, a pilsner, and a hef, and we'd do a couple other things, a barley wine, believe it or not, that had to go to the liquor store. Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of...
Had to go to the state liquor store and be sold warm.
Yes.
Because you couldn't sell cold beer above a certain ABV.
Yeah, that was a strange thing, but I did learn how to turn a lot of beer out of a little system, which has served me very well at our current location, so... It all came around, and it was great guys that were working there, and most of them are all still doing stuff. So, and Scott, after he got back from Germany, went to Sierra Nevada to Chico and was a shift brewer briefly, and then he started the R&D system there. He was the first R&D brewer, then transferred out to Mills River and opened that place as the head brewer, and basically told me he got tired of that and went back to R&D. Too many meetings, not enough brewing.
Hey, that's how it all goes, right? Eventually you find your little 5-barrel pilot system and you just hang out on the brew deck, at least once a week.
Yeah, let's not sell it short. It's a German engineered 20-barrel pilot system there.
Man, those pilot systems are amazing at Mills River, open top fermenters.
Oh, yeah.
I loved it. They've got like a little baby centrifuge in their 20-barrel pilot brewery. Okay, right. Sure, because that's what everybody's pilot brewery has, right?
And I went out there this fall and we brewed a normal stout, so 6%. No flavors other than roast barley and some chocolate malt. No chocolate, no coffee, and that was great. That was fun.
Just a stout.
Yeah. And I got to have a celebration off the fermenter pigtail. So that was kind of like a dream come true.
There's your flex.
Yeah.
All right. So then, what happened with your career from that point?
Yeah, I moved back after a couple of years at UNA. I wanted to come back here, finish up school, and I got a job at the 777 Brew Pub, which is inside Main Street Station, down the road from where we are now. And I was the assistant there for about a year and then took over and was there almost 10 years. So kind of classic old brew pub where you had a pale ale, a golden ale, Vienna lager, a porter, and then your seasonals. And so I made a lot more work for myself by getting creative and adding more tap lines and making little batches. And so that was fun because you got bored making those same beers over and over again.
So rather than just, phone it in, you decided to make your job more difficult.
Yeah, no, I do that now too. It's a bad habit.
Is it a bad habit?
Yeah, well, it makes me feel older than I already am at this point.
You're creating value wherever you go, right?
Yeah.
Creating new experiences.
I have a lot more help. I was by myself at 777. Now I got a lot more help. I got a great crew. So
sure. So then, so what's the Able Baker story?
Yeah. So I met Randy, who's the main owner. Probably we've been open almost 5 years. 7 years ago, he was looking for some advice. They were trying to get started. They were home brewers. They had the brand. They had a couple beers. Atomic Duck was in its infancy then. And I was working at Joseph James, and we had some tank space. They had a building picked out. It fell through. And I mentioned to him, I'm like, well, you could brew it here and get it out in the market, which he did. So about 2 years of that before. And then eventually I thought that it'd be a lot funner because we were just a production brewery, no tap room. I didn't think that was the best business model at the time, and they have since closed. So I was right there. So I jumped ship. So I've been the first and only head brewer at Able Baker, and been there since the beginning. All the design flaws and problems at the brewery are my fault because I got to pick everything, and I didn't get to pick the size of the space though. So we jammed what we could in there.
No, but you spec'd that SS Brewtech system in there.
Yeah. We made the good decision looking back to jam as many tanks as we could in there, and we went bigger than we thought we should. And now we wish, well, we couldn't have gone much bigger, but we got them all in there.
So it worked out. You went by the logic, we should buy the biggest system we can, and then you did. And now you're really happy about that decision.
Yeah, we definitely didn't buy the biggest brew house because we couldn't find anyone that made anything over a 15 barrel in direct fire, and we didn't have room or budget for the boiler room and all that. But we pushed the SS to the limits every day.
Every day, huh?
Yeah, Atomic Duck, we knock out 23 barrels out of that system by high gravity brewing. So yeah, we're pushing it. The mash tun doesn't like us.
Well, hey, that's ambitious. Well, I can't wait to talk more about how you do that. Before we do that, streamline efficiency with Omega Yeast Diacetyl Knockout Series. The DKO series is comprised of 8 familiar yeast strains engineered to knock out the formation of diacetyl before it starts. The strains you know now better, available now for made-to-order pitchables at any volume. Contact Omega Yeast today at omegayeast.com. Also, ABS Commercial has been a full-service brewery outfitter for over 10 years. They're proud to offer brewhouses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country, as well as equipment for distilling, cider making, wine making, and more. They know the ins and outs of the brewing and installation process and can design the perfect setup for you, whether you're just starting out or looking to expand. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized brewery needs. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. And if you're a brewer who's also interested in distilling, subscribe now to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast, available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Hosted by Sydney Jones, head distiller for Few Spirits in Chicago, and Molly Troop, master distiller for Freeland Spirits in Portland, Oregon. This podcast explores the technical and creative processes behind great spirits through conversations with some of the leading distillers working today. It's everything you love about the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, but focused on distilling. Click on the link in the show notes and give it a listen. Some really good episodes recently from there. Ali Ochoa, Lisa Wicker, et cetera, et cetera. Definitely check it out. I'm having fun producing that show and diving deeper into the distilling world as a sideline from all my work here in the beer space. Anyway, Matt, we were talking about 23 barrels out of your 15 barrel system, doing some high gravity brewing on Atomic Duck just to meet this crazy demand for a West Coast style IPA that you brew. Talk to me about Atomic Duck, and maybe we should back up a little before we go, fully into there and talk about, your head brewer, director of brewing ops, #1 for Able Baker, which means that when it came to developing an approach to brewing, a philosophy around brewing that infuses all of the beers that you make. I mean, you were a big part of that. How did you all envision what you were going to make at Able Baker and why?
We knew that the Atomic Duck was always the flagship, and so West Coast IPA, more modern, not too bitter, but not lacking bitterness, and focusing on the dry hop. Basically all Whirlpool. We have a Flame Out edition, but Whirlpool hops. We wanted it pretty much bone dry, and we get it bone dry. We're like 1.4, 1.6 Plato.
1.4.
Yeah. And part of that, I
Damn, that is dry.
Yeah. The high gravity, we're just doing a bigger mash and using dextrose, not extreme amount, but enough to help out dry out, and then just backwatering on the pump over.
That's just so extremely dry. Why?
It just...
not that there's anything wrong with that. I just find it, anomalous, since a lot of folks are trying to, especially with a single West Coast IPA, 1.8 is still like really dry. 1.4 is abnormally dry. 2.5 is like, oh, that's regular dry.
Yeah, and as we started having to go higher gravity and push it harder and harder, we noticed that the beer was just drying out more just on its own, and we decided to just sit with it. We're like, we like it. We like a little bit more sweetness when it's fresh, but then especially when we're QCing cans and when you get old draft at places, we realize, and most brewers would know this, your IPAs tend to sweeten up as they get a little older. And we're like, the drier we go now, the most people are going to drink this. It's going to be where we want it to be when they're drinking it. And we still like it when it's fresh. And the difference between 2 and the 1.4, 1.6, eventually we didn't notice enough of a difference to try to purposely go back up. So we didn't do it on purpose, but we stayed there on purpose because we could have easily gone back up, but we just liked it and just stuck with it.
And so that's generally a product of the high gravity brewing, which is probably, as you say, just a kind of, dextrose in addition to malt, creating a drier beer out of that.
We're mashing
more fermentable beer at least.
We're mashing low to it, not real low, but like 150, 152, and then the dextrose. We don't put any real specialty malt other than a little Vienna and a bag of dextrin, and then
a bag of dextrin.
Yeah, just a bag of dextrin malt. And
why that?
Just I think it's.
That just feels like, toothy body at that point. Why would you do that?
It just, we would try it, and I think that we couldn't taste or notice any difference, but the head retention was better when we were doing that because we were using a lot of dextrose and backwatering on the pump over. So we're brewing at normal strength. In the brew house, it's high gravity, but when it hits the fermenter, it's normal gravity. So we don't have the equipment to be watering after fermentation. And it just helped out with the head retention. So
just enough protein to
So we keep
Makes
it.
Sense.
Yeah, and we experiment with it, and like I told you before, we'd switched over to pilsner malt in the last year. And
you told me before, but you didn't tell everyone here.
Yeah.
So you, for the most of the life of it, it was a 2-row based beer.
Yeah, it was always RAR 2-row, and then we switched to the RAR North Star Pils, and in Atomic Duck's like 70.
Because it's just totally normal to take your, flagship IPA and then switch it from 2-row over to Pilsner malt.
There's a lot of brewers that are switching to Pilsner malt for that, West Coast IPA. And we, from listening to the podcast and having beers like that, we're like, well, let's try it. So we would bring in bags, because we have a silo. We'd bring in bags and do a few batches. And we liked it maybe better, maybe equal or better, but it helped out all our lagers. So we're like, well, let's just get a silo full. And then once we got the silo, it was hard to go back. We're like, we're just going to stick with it till our contract's up at least, and then revisit. But I don't see us switching back. We like where it's at now.
What changed when you started moving over from, this RAR Pilsner to RAR North Star Pils?
The color definitely dropped noticeably, and then also just the perception of dryness, bitterness went up a little bit, and we did back down because we didn't like that. It just came off a little more bitter. We hadn't changed the recipe at that point, but we just backed the bittering, and we're just using some flex for bittering, just a clean, real small bittering load. And then, like I said, there's no other hops till right at flame out. We throw some while the kettle's still hot, and then we cool down into the whirlpool and then add the rest of the whirlpool hops in there. And it's Idaho 7. We also use Incognito, Citra Incognito, and that started as the whirlpool is a 15-barrel whirlpool that we didn't size that. I got it from doing a consulting gig for some other brewery that was trying to open. They didn't need it, so they just gave it to me as part of the deal, and we used it, and it's helped turn beers a lot quicker, but it wasn't built for a lot of hops, so The Citra Incognitos helped us out a lot there by packing more Whirlpool hops in there, and that stuff smells great and performs great.
So walk me through that. Your high gravity brewing, and obviously, you're watering back through that Whirlpool process or after post Whirlpool process.
Yeah, no, it's in the Whirlpool, so that helps.
Even though your Whirlpool is not sized to the 23 barrel.
Yeah, we max it out, and then we're still watering after the pump over the wort goes through. We calculate, and we've got a flow meter on there, and we do straight hot liquor water through the heat exchanger. So we're just switching to hot liquor and throwing another probably 100 gallons of straight water in there to hit our gravities.
So then is this one cool pooled through that process?
It gets watered down in the kettle after the flame out hop's set for 5 minutes hot, like it basically at boiling temperature, just without the burner. And then we add water up to about 20 barrels, and that cools us down to right around 180. And then Whirlpool gets hops and Incognito at 180. And that's just a normal 25-minute rest.
So why the Incognito at that point?
Because
obviously you can get it really concentrated that volume.
We can't put enough hops in that Whirlpool to do what we want to do with that much wort in there. We just wouldn't be able to get enough the vegetal matter where our port is. So the Incognito lets us get that extra hop flavor in there without losing wort and jamming up our heat exchanger.
That's true. It would work against your goals of creating more volume if you're soaking up that much liquid and that many hops. So, you didn't always use Incognito for this, obviously, because, when you started brewing Atomic Duck, Incognito didn't exist. As you made that transition, how did you make that transition?
I'm just talking to the guys at Willamette Valley, their technical guy, kind of walked us through what the rough approximation for the replacement value was on it. And then we just started throwing it in there, and we're like, man, this stuff smells great, comes out great. So we were sold pretty quick. If anything, it made the beer better almost instantly because it was allowing us to get more Citra or just hops in general into the Whirlpool.
More saturation, less loss, just intensity right off the bat.
Yep.
Is there anything that you do to promote the kind of integration of this, liquid product, liquid hop, advanced product, in that kind of Whirlpool? Yeah,
we put it in so when we start filling the kettle, we got a sous vide sitting there, and we put that to 130 Fahrenheit, put that Incognito in there. So by the time we're ready to add it,
nice little sous vide bath.
Yeah, it pours really nice, and we pour it immediately as soon as the wort starts hitting the Whirlpool. Because when we first started using it, we'd end up with a giant hop slick on top of the Whirlpool. So immediately when the wort comes in, the Incognito goes in, and that's made a huge difference. And it incorporates well. There's no oil slick anymore, and because you'd see it on the side of the Whirlpool, and you're like, well, there's a bunch of good stuff that didn't make it into the beer. So that made a big difference. So even with the cool pool being at 180, it still incorporates well.
Sure. I feel like we've somehow skipped a lot of my normal, kind of baseline process and gone right into the Whirlpool, which is totally fine. We can kind of, I'm such a linear thinker around these kinds of things. But I also want to go back to this subject of malt before we really dive even deeper into hops, and this idea of, not just the Pilsner base malt now, but also of blending in, some Vienna malt, whether that's for color or flavor on top of that, in addition to the Stection malt. Talk to me about that process.
Yeah, I think the Vienna I used a lot of Vienna when I was at Joseph James, and we were brewing Atomic Duck there, and we used a lot of Vienna in our flagship Citra Rye Pale Ale. I always love Vienna. It's probably my favorite malt. I love Victory malt.
What do you love about Vienna, and what is it?
I just like I like the toasty, like bready maltiness without sweetness. Like I love Munich too, but I wouldn't put Munich in this IPA. Like I've had IPAs that people tell me there's Munich in it, and that's great. But when I've made IPAs with Munich, I didn't like it as much. Too much maltiness, too much sweetness for me. But the Vienna was always a nice balance. You get a little bit, but in my experience, just no sweetness. And it helps with the color. The one thing we didn't like with the Pilsner switch over was the color was lighter, and we liked a little bit more of the gold. And so we just threw one more bag of Vienna in there. So you could say maybe it defeats the whole purpose, but it still is a different beer, still a bit drier tasting and lighter bodied. But the color is the same now.
Does it defeat the purpose, or
I don't know.
Is it just a different avenue for achieving
there's so many hops,
shade on a similar goal?
There's so many hops in the beer that saying if you can taste that Vienna or not, I think I might be lying if I said I could taste it very well.
Are there what percentage is that Vienna?
Oh, geez, let's see. It's 2 bags in 15, 100-pound grist, and we're using Brice now, so 100 pounds. So way less than 10%. And the dextrose, we're using 3 bags of dextrose in the kettle right at the beginning. Even before boil, we're throwing that in.
Not insignificant, but not a ton either.
Yeah, we're not going overboard with it. And that was originally just to dry it out back at Joseph James. But then when we got to this place, it's really helped just boost the gravity because we don't use malt extract in it, which we could, because we throw, the bad part about doing this is we throw a lot of good wort down the drain. Like our second runnings are enough to make a small beer on that, which is not the greatest thing, but we couldn't keep up if we were brewing 15. We did size all our tanks at 20 barrels, so I knew from the beginning that we were going to be pushing some volume, and we could only have a 15 barrel brew house, and so it's a good thing we did that. So everything's in 20 barrel increments. We got 20s, 40s, 60s, couple 10s, and a 7 for little stuff.
So you're doing triple batches out of your 15 barrel pushed to 20 something, 20 plus in order to then fill a 60.
And we're pushing those 60s too. So we're like 70 barrels into the 60 with some
brutal, man.
Yeah. Haas makes the, what is it called? Hop Aid anti-foam that's made from hops, and that's a lifesaver because that lets us push those tanks without making a mess and losing our yeast.
Maybe we should call this episode High Efficiency Brewing.
Low efficiency mash, high efficiency capacity. Right?
Sure. Pushing it. Let's talk about hops in general then on Atomic Duck. Obviously you mentioned Citra Incognito and some flax at the very front for bitterness. And anything else that figures in hot side?
Yeah, Idaho 7 is everything else on the hot side. So we're doing
just
Idaho 7.
Just for those survivables, man.
Yeah, when I first heard that, we tried it and just liked it, how it tasted and how it went. And we've actually started incorporating it into the dry hop on a really small scale, but it goes into the whirlpool. So we got about 22 pounds of Idaho 7 in the whirlpool, and then the Incognito.
How do you think about it in terms of flavor that it adds, especially on the hot side?
At this point, it's so hard for me to say because I've had it so many times that it's just like Atomic Duck flavor to me. And we've never made a beer that was heavy Idaho 7. So it does what it does, and it kind of fills out I think it fills out the flavor. And where everyone knows what Citra tastes like, and the Idaho 7 kind of sneaks in there because the dry hop is heavy Citra, but a lot of Amarillo too. So it's Citra, Amarillo, and now some Idaho 7, but a much smaller amount. And we're using about a 50-50 at this point of cryo and T90s in the fermenter. And that's helped us a lot on loss and just... Honestly, the blend of the two I like
50-50
better.
50-50 T90 cryo in the fermenter.
Yeah,
okay.
We've upped the cryo as we've done it. It's also nicer not to carry so many damn hops up on top of those 60s.
Yeah.
That's just a side bonus because most of the things we figure out that make the beer better make more work for us. So that's one of the few that's made a little bit less work for us. But
what is obviously with that kind of hop? Well, before we get into dry hopping, let's talk about fermentation. With Atomic Duck, is it just a straight kind of Chico yeast? I mean, you've got your own Chico connections here via your buddy Scott.
Yeah, he can't hook me up with yeast.
No,
but, yeah, he could. He has his own yeast problems because the Mills River. I don't know if most people know that. That's the Hazy Little Thing factory. Yeah, they make everything else, but that's a Hazy Little Thing machine out there. So, and they have problems. Even Sierra Nevada has problems keeping up with yeast. So. But
I believe
they handle it, obviously. Yeah, no,
which is why he's much happier in the R&D space than in the production space, trying to plot out how they're going to grow up enough, hazy yeast to.
Yeah, we do use the D-Free from Berkeley, And I got my Omega shirt on, and we've used their version too, and we get other yeast from Omega. But we started using that because for two reasons. For one, I'm one of those people that's just diacetyl blind. So I always have to have other people in the brewery, which usually is not a problem. But then the hop creep thing, and we're having to turn the beer so fast, it's like we didn't have time to deal with the hop creep and letting it set. So when that came out, we tried it, and we really liked it. And we do things to keep the hop creep to a minimum anyway, but our beer finish is so dry, there's nothing left to creep mostly. But it does, a little like 2/10.
How do you go south of 1.4 or 1.6?
That's where it gets to, it gets from the 1.6 to 1.4, I think, because of the hops. But
interesting. Well, and of course, when it's that dry, you also don't need any of that diacetyl, would be pretty apparent, in that kind of super dry.
Yeah, no, so we've had good luck with that stuff, and they're really good to work with. They get us yeast real quick. If we're in a pinch, they usually can turn it around really quick.
And that's just
it's the Chico.
It's Chico without the. Cool.
Yeah.
Anything different about fermenting it with it versus straight up Chico?
No, not that we've noticed. I mean, it's pretty much the same. In the beginning, we had a few issues with the haze problems, and they had messed with it a little bit more.
Haze. Oh, it was creating haze.
We were not getting the clarity on some of it, but they recultured it from the slants and figured out they just had a couple batches or something that were less flocculent, and that was way back in the beginning when we first started working with them. Ever since then, just like Chico, we used to use some San Diego Super a long time ago, but mostly we were using 01 before we switched to the D-Free or something similar from Omega. And yeah, we haven't had any differences than Chico.
And that works, in terms of generations and
we'll get about
cropping.
10 generations, and we could go more than that, but we see a little bit less clarity if we go far, and it's probably us, in our harvesting, the way we're harvesting. But 10 generations, and we don't have any problems. And Atomic Duck's 7.2%, so we're right on the edge where we're always repitching off that beer and hardly anything else because we're brewing it all the time. And then obviously the lagers are a whole just 34. We're using 3470 and a 50/50 3470 Nova lager now blend. So two different yeast companies.
Blending your lager yeast.
Yeah, Wallaman doesn't like that when they come in. And Sylvie lives in town, and she's like, using the 3470. Nova's too clean. No sulfur. So
okay, Matt, we're gonna have to talk now. We're gonna have to talk about that too. Damn it, man. Okay, but before we, I'm
gonna send you on all kinds of tangents.
That's what we love here on the podcast. We love going down the rabbit holes and and diving into what you're learning from brewing with all these things. And I want to keep talking about dry hopping before we start talking about lager brewing, and then I absolutely want to get back into talking about your hazy session IPA and the way that you blend that with Atomic Duck to create a third beer out of those things, which is interesting and novel on that. Before we do that, this episode is sponsored by Yakima Chief Hops. As a global preferred supplier of New Zealand hops, Yakima Chief is the source for the pronounced bright and tropical aromas New Zealand hops are known for, adding a rush of exotic fruits and zesty citrus to your recipes. Used on their own or in conjunction with your favorite American varieties, NZ hop brands are an excellent tool for exceptional brews. NZ Cryo is now available through Yakima Chief Hops. Learn more at yakimachief.com. Also, if you're opening or expanding a brewery, getting your building right is one of the most important things you'll ever do. The architects at OPA Design Studio are your partners in developing the unique design you need. With over a decade of experience designing breweries, the folks at OPA are here to serve as your trusted experts from start to finish with their full range of architectural services. Visit designopa.com to set up your no-obligation introductory consultation today. All right, so I got to talk about blending lager yeast, but we're gonna sideline that conversation and finish talking about IPA first. So talk to me about dry hop process behind Atomic Duck.
Yeah, we don't have any tricks on that. We're fermenting at 66 the whole way, and then when we hit about 1.82 or whatever, we'll drop it down to 60. Our yeast just keeps going. It doesn't slow it down too much, and we'll dry hop at 60. So we'll pull all the yeast we're going to pull, dump all the yeast off, we'll burp the tank a couple times through the racking arm, try to get the bubbles out. So we're not going to have hop geysers because our tanks are so full that you're staring right at the wort there. You could put your finger down there and touch it if you wanted to. And it gets a little scary up there. So we try to do everything we can. And so we'll go up, throw one bag in, pop the lid back on, come down. That always sets it off for a while. And then after that, it settles down. We go up there, put the rest in. And then day 2, we come in and usually...
How long do you let it settle for? An hour, 2 hours? What is it, 10 minutes?
It depends on the beer, that batch, and how much is in there. CO2 is in there. Sometimes it'll be an hour. Sometimes you can just keep going once in a while, just keep putting in there. Burke, my my right-hand man, he's a little more daring than me, so he'll watch it. And if it's good, he'll just like keep handing bags up. And me, I'm like, I've learned my lessons, and I just go up there and dump one in, put the lid on, and go back down. And if nothing happens, then I go back up. But yeah, we do that. And then the next day we come in and we recirculate with the pump, and we'll do that for about 3 hours.
With a pump?
Yeah, we'll use a pump and go push through the very bottom and pull from the sample port and stir it up. We used to go through the top.
Now, do you know how many times I've asked brewers if they recirc? And I swear for the last 6 months, no one has said yes on that. Everyone's burping. Everyone's afraid of what the pump is going to do to their beer.
We've tried burping, and it's just not as strong. And it pulls more things out of the hops to run it with the pump, positive and negative. So it depends on where you come down on that. We like it a little bit more aggressive. We don't do that on the hazies. We don't do it on the smaller tanks, but on the 60s, we just don't get the hop aroma unless we do that. We'd have to up the hops to pull it off. And we just
the beer can handle some of that extra little polyphenol sharpness or whatever it is.
Yeah, and we're careful. We make sure the pumps aren't leaking and everything's tight, and we purge everything with CO2 and then waste a little bit of beer purging through everything. And we have our system down pretty good, and we haven't noticed any negative effects, age like staling or anything, getting oxygen. And we need to get an O2 meter, and then we'd really know, and then we might stop doing it. But some things are better just if you don't know. But I mean, we do our QCs on our cans, and so we'd know if we had a big problem.
That's fair. And so then, you do this dry hop basically in one charge, but through a couple of different additions over several hours.
Yeah, we used to mess around with multiple day different charges, but we just, like I said, we don't have the time. So Atomic Duck is a blend of necessity and, we want it to taste how it tastes, so we make sacrifices. But, some of the things we have to do because we have to do it, with the brew house being too small and the production times, shorten them as much as we can without hurting the quality of beer. And we kind of know right where that is. And if we have to let it set a little longer, we do, and we miss our schedule, and but we can't sit around waiting for 5-day dry hop. So we'll dry hop it one day, recirculate it, and then the next day we crash it, dump everything, and we're fine.
One day recirculate and then crash.
Yeah, so it goes in on a Monday.
You guys aren't messing around.
Recircs on a Tuesday, crash on Wednesday, and dump everything fining by Thursday or Friday if it's cold enough.
Do we talk about what the dry hop charge is on that one?
It's Citra, but mostly Citra and Citra Cryo, Amarillo Cryo, and then a 11-pound bag of Idaho 7.
A little blend of old and new.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's really, Amarillo's not that old, so.
No, we in the Amarillo, we've taken it out here and there, sometimes because I'm lame and I don't order enough, and other times because we want to experiment, but we always come back and put it back in. In my defense, we're busy as hell, and we're brewing more of it than ever. And I'm like, we went through it that fast? I'm like, Jesus.
Because this beer, Atomic Duck, is 70% of your production.
Yeah. In-house, it's our best seller, and not anywhere near 70% of in-house sales. But on production side, yeah, we're canning that and kegging it and sending cans and kegs out, at the door every week. And that's our number one selling craft beer in Vegas of local breweries. I don't know what New Belgium is a whole different ball game now.
Don't compare yourselves.
No.
Comparison is the thief of joy. Just celebrate the fact that you've got a large market here in Las Vegas amongst folks that want to drink Atomic Duck right here. Well, let's talk to me about this. Well, we should talk about Waddle, which is your 4% hazy IPA or hazy session IPA. Obviously, at 4%, that's a
I think we got it officially at 4.4%. So it's low. We're keeping it as a true session beer, and that's the one hazy that the brewers drink, because part of it's because we all like it, but also it's nice to have a
4.4% flavorful beer. Sure.
Yeah.
With some of those hops that you like too.
Yeah, that one we screw around with the most. Well, actually, I shouldn't say we. I let my my main brewer, Burke, I gave that beer to him because he loved it, and I'm like, we need to change it. We got to where we didn't like it as much anymore, and so I told him you do whatever the hell you wanted with it. Keep the alcohol the same, keep it hazy, keep it good. And,
what were you not liking about it? Well, how did you identify? Hey, I don't think this is hitting the way we want it to hit now.
Yeah,
and why? Because I mean, if the recipe doesn't change, all of a sudden you guys are changing.
I think it was us realizing that it was a little rough, because it's hard with a 4.4% beer. You can over dry hop it easy. You can definitely overdo it in the kettle. So once we started cool pooling that one, which we didn't used to because it was a giant pain in the ass to cool pool a 7-barrel beer we didn't like running stuff through our heat exchanger. So backwatering things like Atomic Duck, easy to get the temp down, but running things through our heat exchanger is prone to clogging. We didn't like doing that, but with Waddle, we just quit throwing any hops until the cool pool. So that kind of solved the heat exchanger issue. Since we started doing that, then he's managed to smooth it way out and playing with the
hops then hot side, or at least no hop material. It could be flowable hops.
Yeah, just flex for a tiny bit of, almost just to say we put something in there. And then the cool pool and the hops on that we screwed around with, or he screwed around with a lot. We always did, but I couldn't even tell you everything that's in it. It's Nectaron for sure. That's the newest thing in it. We've always put Talus in it. We like Talus, but you got to be careful with that one.
Why?
I think it's in that Sabro lineage, where to me it comes off as really like just citrus bomb, like tangerine and orange, but it does have an aggressive, like almost that woodiness in the back of it. So you can go a little much on it, but it's pretty potent. So we like that. And I think he's got Mandarina and Lotus. So everything we fooled around with that we liked ended up in that beer, as long as it worked. So that one's changed a lot. And
talk to me about
Citra too. There's a little bit of Citra.
Of course, there's Citra in there. What I'm curious, like building a 4.4% hazy IPA with body that doesn't come across as too sweet, like building the texture into that beer in a way that doesn't just convey as like, unfermented, malt. That's an interesting challenge. And obviously hops are playing into that as well as malt. How do you all think about, both the textural contribution of malt outside of sweetness, but also that kind of textural and haze, contribution of the hops themselves, and how that affects mouthfeel in such a light beer?
Yeah, we use oats and chit malt in all our hazies. We don't use
chit
wheat.
Malt. There you go.
Actually, now I shouldn't say chit. We quit using chit because we were using the RAR. When RAR came out with their dextrin malt, we switched over to that, and that worked just as well. And it just worked better with ordering. But we use that. Oats. We used to use malted oats. We got away from malted oats. They made the mash a lot nicer, but they add a little bit more color that we didn't like. And so we went back to flaked oats, and we started using Gambrinus honey malted oats. I've always loved honey malt. They came out with that. I'm like, well, let's try it. And then we liked it, and we went without it once, and then we went back to it. Ever since then, we went back to it. And so that's just a little bit to give it some specialty malt. So it gives it a little bit more like it's, I don't know how to describe Gambrinus honey malt because it's in that beer. So it's all hops and everything else, but it gives it a little sweetness without being crystal malt sweetness and that same oat body. So
what's the overall kind of grist look like in broader terms then?
Yeah, it's 20% oats, and then the pilsner base malt.
Right.
And trying to remember, He's in charge of that one now, so I'd have to look at the recipe. It's his fault. He changes it all the time.
Hey,
so.
that's fair. That's fair. You change your recipes all the time?
Yeah, there used to be Vienna in it, and I don't know if there is. We liked it when it looked lighter. Sure. We started going for the visual of the real light hazy beer too, and that's one nice thing with the Pilsner over the 2 rows. Getting a little bit more of that real light look to it. And then with the dry hop, we just had
you can dial it in with your other malt and get it exactly the lightness that you want.
And we just use Berkeley's London, so it's just London in that one, and their London, at least in my experience, finishes a little bit higher than what we were used to, which works a lot in that beer.
Why the Berkeley London?
Also the defree thing.
Yeah,
we just liked it. They made the London and the Chico were their 2 first ones, and the hazies are the worst with getting the hop creep because we use more hops. So we just
even in a 4.4% beer.
Probably not on that one, but we use it in all the hazies.
Fair.
And we just liked it that it finished higher, so it would finish ideally if we finished that one at 3-4 or something would be perfect for us. If it goes a little lower than that, it's a little dry for that beer, and so it just works. And then the dry hop was just a matter of we definitely don't even bubble that one. Well, we bubble a little bit maybe, but not like an active, just a stir. It's a 7-barrel tank, so it's not much to do with that. But why
do you brew that one in a 7-barrel tank?
To keep it fresh, and it's in-house only. It's in-house only draft, so it keeps it fresh, and we can screw with it more, so it's fun.
Here you got these big tanks that you're, maxing out your brew house on to, crank through it. And then you got this one where you're like, I'm just going to put it into 7-barrel tanks. And
that mash looks like a mistake every time we drop that mash. Like, did you forget to put the malt in here? There's no malt in here. But that one we just had to figure out the dry hop to go as high as you can without ruining the mouthfeel and getting that astringency because it's such a light beer.
How high is high?
I have no idea anymore. It's not crazy. It's definitely not up to, I don't think it's even 2 pounds a barrel. I think it's a little less than that maybe, but he keeps up. It depends which hops we use, so it changes.
Okay.
If we use more Talus, we would use less pounds because it's too strong.
Yeah.
And the Lotus is super soft. Like it's almost like vanilla or like a creamsicle, but it's subtle. So I like that hop, but you couldn't get away with it as like a solo hop because it's just not strong enough, but it's nice in the background. Mandarina seems to be the same way, pretty light. Citra is Citra. And so it just depends what the blend is. And then now the Nectaron is a whole different thing. We just finished a hazy that's all Nectaron, except for maybe a little bit of Lotus in the Whirlpool. And that was just because of Waddle that we had partial bags laying around. We're like, let's just throw this in here.
It's making all Nectaron beer. What'd you discover through doing that?
And we just like Nectaron. It's
what do you like about it?
I think it's strong for one. Like I like the pungency of it, and it's very tropical, very citrusy tropical. It's got a little bit of a weird. It's different, So it doesn't really smell really close to anything else. It's not way off, but it's just different enough. I like that it's unique, so something different, and it's got a good dry hop punch to it. So we tried it when it came out, liked it, and just stuck with it on this one beer.
Is there something you like working it into with? You find it plays well with something else?
Well, in the Waddle, it's with all that other stuff. So yeah, it's a good. So I think most people probably use it as more of a side hop, but we like going all the way with it in the once a year. The Nevada State Flower is our hazy because it's got the traffic cone is the Nevada State Flower. So it's a double hazy, and it's all Nectaron this year. So when it comes out in another week, you can taste Nectaron.
Just in time for CBC.
It'll be on tap during CBC.
Teasing it out.
Brewers that want to check out 100% almost Nectaron beer, then get that one, the Nevada State Flower.
So then, and I love that the Nevada State Flower is the traffic cone. That
was our marketing guy's brilliant idea, and it is. The cans are great. They're orange, and they got the cone. It's cool.
It's cheeky. So then you also make a beer that is a blend of Waddle, which is this 4.4% hazy session IPA, and Atomic Duck, which is your 7.2% West Coast IPA. Talk to me about how you blend and what that produces blending 2 IPAs like this. It's novel. It's interesting to me. I can't say in the history of the podcast I've ever heard someone make a beer by blending these two disparate things.
No, they just don't tell you. No,
okay. No one wants to own up to it, but Matt's here to share the truth.
Now, when we opened Able Baker, we'd been contracting all the beer out of Joseph James, but that was only a couple beers because it was all had to be in kegs and cans. So we didn't have, when we opened the tap room, the brew house wasn't fully commissioned. Like we had most things hooked up, but we couldn't brew for a while. So we're trying to get more beers, a lot of guest taps, but we just blended those two because we could, and just to throw another beer up there. And then people liked it, of course. So it had to stick around because we get customers if that's their favorite beer. And honestly, it's a help to fill out our giant. We have too many beers on tap, and I tell the owner that all the time, that there's too many beers on tap. That one is nice because it's
there's like what 20 something, maybe even more than that.
I think
like,
we
have
a
lot of beers.
Yeah, I think we have 28 taps that are our own, and we make a root beer in house too. But we have a cider from Blake's and nitro coffee, and we usually have one guest tap from another local brewery on, but all the rest are ours. So it's obnoxious trying to keep that filled up. Not fun.
A fun challenge.
Fun for the customer.
So this blend of hazy IPA and West Coast IPA, what is it? What's the result? It could very much be an unintentional train wreck. Yeah. But obviously it's not if it's stuck around for this long.
The hops play well together, and it's just it's a hazy for people that don't like hazies because the West Coast dries it out so much that people. I think that's what it is. People like it. It's light bodied for a hazy, but it has all the hop aroma. Definitely doesn't have the smooth, silky, juicy mouthfeel. But I don't know. It just the hops work together. I think it's probably the key. Brings the alcohol down. So I don't know. People just like it. I never drink it except to make sure it tastes right. It's just, I don't know.
And what's the blend process?
It depends on how lucky we are. If we have a little tank free, then we'll blend it that way just by pulling off of a tank of duck and pushing kegs of waddle in. But a lot of times it's just a keg transfer deal where we fill half a keg full of atomic duck and then top it up with half a keg of waddle.
And then turn it upside down, or roll it around a little bit.
The act of blending it that way, it mixes by the time it goes up on tap.
Sure.
So, it's just a beer that gets made because people keep requesting, and it fills out a tap board, so I don't complain about it because it's handy. And like I was telling you before, we do a lot of blending on the strong side. We have about usually 7 or 8 beers over 10%. A lot of those are barrel aged, and there's a lot of blending that goes into that, and that helps us keep a variety of beers on. And frankly, I think it's just fun to blend those up, and some of them get flavors, cocoa nibs, coconut, whatever added to it. But there's straight blends. The Belgians work real well with that when we're doing brew our quad, and we'll have the quad, the different saisons. We do some barrel aged saisons, and if we have a double and quad and barrel aged quad, we can make some beers that my whole philosophy with that is it has to taste like its own beer. It can't taste like it's just this thrown together just to have another beer with another name. Like it has to taste good, and I'd say it's like 50-50 if what in my head pans out in the blend, and I have no attachment to my ideas. If it doesn't taste good, I'm just like, that sucks. And then some things that don't make sense taste good. So it's just all kind of by sitting around and titrating things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. And
titrating in those bench trials.
Yeah, right. And the barrel aged stuff lends itself to that, I think, because we don't have 100 barrels. We don't have room for it. So we do about 3 or 4 beers that go into barrels and make the blends off those. And then obviously they come out as what they are too, is the main portion. So
I'm doing my mental math here and realizing that you were the brewer that made those mixed fermentation Joseph James beers back in the day.
Yeah, that would be Kyle Weniger mostly. He's still in town. He has his own Gypsy Juxta Nomad brand, and he was in charge of that. I helped, and I did a lot of the bullshit work that he didn't want to do when it came down to staying and playing. This stuff can't touch any of the other stuff. And oh God, the hoops we jumped through on those. But some of those came out really good, and we still have some of them because they were going to dump them all when that place closed. So we bought everything from them, and we've had stuff for years that's sitting kegs in the back of our cooler. And once in a while, we'll pull them out, put them on tap, and yeah, they've held up.
Look at that. Well, let's talk about lager brewing with blended lager yeast. Just because you brought it up, and now we have to talk about it.
Yeah, no, we're always 3470 and ferment us, like just the dry. Start dry, and then we'll use it about 3 times, repitching. And for the our Mexican lager, the El Pato Loco, we wanted to be able to turn that one a bit quicker. 3470 will turn it real quick, but it would be a little sharper than we wanted. And when the Nova came out, we just figured we'd give it a try because it sounded good. And it was almost like it was too clean. Like it was just the most neutral beer I'd ever tasted. I'm like, it's good, but it's boring. So we're like, let's blend it with dry yeast. So easy to blend the yeast. So the 50-50 gave us just enough. Like I like a tiny touch of sulfur and a touch of that sharpness. And then, but we liked it better. And we did a bunch of tests. Even with our Pilsner, we switched over to that, which that was tough because I always liked the Pilsner with 3470, but we all agreed. We did blind test. We're like, nah, we like it better with the blend. So we've just stuck with the blend for all the lagers. And so far, so good. That's maybe been the last year or something we've done that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
50-50 blend of dry lager yeast.
And we'll repitch the blend too, but we never go more than 3 generations on our repitch in that dry yeast.
What happens after 3?
Nothing. It's just that our lager scheduling tends to work that way. Like we wouldn't have anything against it. It's just we'll kind of batch the lagers together and then they tie up the tank. So we can't afford to basically keep.
Not going to give another beer 4 to 6 weeks.
So it's just a timing thing usually. But yeah, no, we like the Nova lager. It's probably great for cold IPA, which we don't really do, but it's so neutral and clean and yeah.
Interesting. And then, of course, when you shifted over to your raw North Star pills, that became the base malt for all of the lagers that you make too.
Yeah, and it's the base malt for almost everything. There's some exceptions. We brewed with Big Dogs Brewing and Love Lady, we all brewed the CBC Welcome beer, which is a coffee porter. And that one we got country malt. Donated all the malts. We're like, all right, we're going to get some Maris Otter in this thing. And so no Pilsner malt in that
All
one.
of a sudden, you found the most expensive base malt that you could use for it.
Yeah, and when we brew our English barley wine, we're not using the silo pills as the base malt. But 90%, probably 95% of the beers that are the Pilsner malt. And it helped our lagers, which is a lesser part of what we brew. But, we sell a lot of the El Pato, the Mexican lager. Pilsner is a good seller in-house. We sell it in cans, too, and it does all right in the market. And that's another one, the brewers, we love that one. And the Pilsner malt helped out with that.
Any other Able Baker beers that you have enjoyed experimenting with or that you've been moving or you or your team have been moving over the last year or two?
Yeah, I mean, we started out with a Saison as our one of our core beers. It's not anymore, but it kind of led us down the road. The same thing when we first started. We're trying to get like more beers out of less product, and we were barrel aging some of that. And we came across actually the owner. I thought it was a stupid idea, so we did our Imperial Honey Dip Stout. It's honey and vanilla. And that's always on tap. So it's 11% Imperial Stout. We barrel aged that, and it's perfect in barrels. And he wanted to use the barrels for something else. I'm like, well, we don't have anything except the Saison. And he's like, well, why don't you put that in there? I'm like, God, that sounds terrible. And then
Stout barrel-aged Saison.
Yeah, well, the Stout had come out of there. So it's an empty bourbon barrel that had Imperial Stout in there. And then the Saison goes in. And we didn't leave it in that long. Maybe I think usually 3 months is like the sweet spot for that beer. But it honestly doesn't pick up any bourbon, and it picks up a little bit of color. It doesn't pick up any roastiness or anything. The beer's out of there, and it just smoothed it out. You get a little oak, and it's a nice beer. So we do that every year. When the honey dip comes out of the barrels, we have that batch of Saison ready. That goes in there. And then we also do that beer into red wine and Chardonnay barrels, and that's a different beer, and we'll add, and then where the blending comes in, we'll make a triple, blend about I think it's a quarter Yeah, a quarter of the triple in with the Saison, boost the alcohol up for those wine barrel ones. And those we do every year. So we'll have and we'll put a little hibiscus into the red wine barrels to get, not in the barrels, but when the beer comes out, to give it a little red, differentiate it better. And those beers are nice and interesting. And so sometimes we'll have like 4 Saisons on at once, which is
4 Saisons at once.
And we're going to do that during CBC for sure. So it's kind of silly in Vegas as far as marketing, and because people don't drink Saisons, but the great thing about Saisons is they don't have to drink them because they really hold up for forever. So that's one of my strategies. Here's one of like the pro tip when you're the boss makes you put on way too many beers. You just brew a lot of beers that don't sell fast but hold up really well. So smoke beers, Saisons, really strong beers, barrel aged beers.
And I love that you're going to roll them out there for CBC, so that when the brewers are around and they want to drink some Saison, they can get it from you.
I think the one thing we won't have is the regular version of it because it's all been barreled. So there'll be no regular Saison.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, Matt, we normally would ask a kind of zooming out question and a big picture question, but I think, since this is the first of our little mini series on Las Vegas CBC breweries, maybe instead of that, we pick your brain on must-do beer things in Las Vegas. For folks that are traveling into Las Vegas, you want to get beyond the casino floors and get beyond, just the shows and the concerts and all the regular entertainment. For the beer nerds that are coming to Las Vegas, what are a few of your must-see or high-priority beer destinations in Las Vegas? Obviously, your brewery is going to be one of them. Where do you go after that?
Well, if you're at our brewery, then the Silver Stamp's only a couple blocks away, so that's definitely a must go for the the really cool beer bar. And the Corey's Fine Wine and Spirits, more on the Henderson side, is a great like bottle shop, but has a bunch of tap handles. They did a big expansion, so that place
Corey's
is great.
Is spelled Khoury. Corey.
Yeah, he's been a stalwart Isa of the craft beer scene since it barely existed. So he's kind of grown along with it and has a great staff, great selection, supports all the local breweries. 595 Craft and Kitchen, also out of way. So the good thing about that, less crowds there. They always have a really good selection of local and other stuff, and the food's really good there. And Big Dogs, if you get into town early, they're doing their Peace, Love, and Happiness Fest. I believe it's on the 19th if CBC starts the 20th. It's on the Saturday. So they're doing they do a fest, I think 4 of those big fests every year. And they go all out and they got bands and the weather should be great. So that's a good place to go, getting out a little bit farther. But those places are good. I mean, obviously you can look up the breweries. We don't have a ton of breweries here, so it's easy to hit most of them. But if you want to get to the breweries, North Fifth is one of the newer ones that's a little bit harder to find, but might be nice because it'd probably be a little bit less crowded on the north side of town. They're doing some good stuff.
You're in a district, the Arts District, where there's a nice little concentration of craft breweries.
Yeah, no, if you walk up the street, you've got Huddle right up there. Hop Nuts is up there. Craft House, their brewery's in Henderson, but they have a tap room. It's probably maybe 6 blocks up from us. That's worth checking out. There's a lot of good restaurants, and Good Pie for Pizza is right up from us. And there's a lot of good stuff on Main Street. So you just keep walking. You'll end up at the 777. Don't go past the 777 unless you're in a car. So. And if you want to hit Fremont Street to see the wackiness, that's always at least once go down there. And walking down Fremont Street, once you get past the Vegas part of it, there's a lot of cool stuff down there too.
What do you do for fun that is not necessarily Vegas casino related?
Yeah, I like going hiking around here.
Yeah.
I live out on the edge of Henderson, so I can be out in the desert in like 5 minutes out of my front door. And that's what I do. I'll go out hiking. Going down to the Colorado River's Knife, Red Rock, Valley of Fire is great. Mount Charleston's great.
appreciate your insight for all these brewers that are going to be traveling to Las Vegas and looking for fun, maybe non-gambling things to do while they're here.
Yeah, and I'm excited. I'll be glad when it's over because it's been so much damn work. But it will be really cool to have CBC here. And hopefully everyone has a good time and doesn't spend too much time in the casinos. Unless that's your thing, Paul Gatza.
Well, I'm looking forward to coming back in a few weeks and seeing everybody here in Las Vegas too. And I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. Schedule a time now to meet with ProBrew at CBC booth 1783. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast's Diacetyl Knockout series is comprised of 8 familiar yeast strains engineered to knock out the formation of diacetyl before it starts. ABS Commercial are proud to offer brewhouses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country. If you're a distiller or curious about it, check out the Craft Spirits Distilling podcast. As the global preferred supplier of New Zealand hops, Yakima Chief is your source for great NZ hops, now available in cryo. And the architects at OPA Design Studio are your partners in developing the unique design that you need. Of course, if you've enjoyed this podcast and the others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, subscribe to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, our Brewing Industry Guide, our all-access subscription tiers for both. And let us know that this content matters for you, because it takes your support for us to continue to bring it to you. Matt, if people want to learn more about Abel Baker, where do they find you all?
Instagram is the only social media that I pay attention to, and barely. But I mean, you just come down to the brewery.
Yeah, where
That's
is
really
it?
the only
It's on
way.
Main Street.
Yeah, Main Street. You can't miss it because we're recording this from the Strat right now. So we are a block and a half north of the Stratosphere on Main Street. So you really can't miss us. We have a giant yellow silo that sticks out of the brewery. It drops down into the tap room because the city wouldn't let us put it outside. So you can't really miss that. It's got a duck painted on it. Come on.
It's all about the duck. You got to come get some duck.
We didn't even talk about the ducks. I'll probably get in trouble for that.
That's all right. We've talked about Atomic Duck enough on this one, and we'll leave the branding to the marketing folks. Matt, it was great talking to you about brewing. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks. See you guys in a couple weeks.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.